Mary Tamm, Second Generation, The Autobiography, Volume 2. Chapter 1, The Androids of Tara. I was thrilled to receive the new scripts for the next story in the Key to Time series. Fans and readers of my previous book will recall that the 1978-79 season of Doctor Who consisted of 6 multi-episode stories, each of which revolved around the search for one of the 6 segments of the eponymous key. As I began reading The Androids of Tara, I grew quite excited, realizing that, at last, Romana was coming more to the fore of the story, starting off the first episode by operating and landing the TARDIS on her own, and then very quickly finding the 4th segment. Also, I was delighted to discover that I was playing not just one, but 4 parts in the plot, namely Romana, Android Romana, Princess Strella, and Android Strella. What more could a girl desire? David Fisher, who wrote the script, had constructed a very gripping tale based on the illustrious Anthony Hope novel of 1894, The Prisoner of Zenda. The book had been adapted many times, mainly for film, but also stage, musical, operetta, radio, and television. Probably the best-known version was the 1937 Hollywood movie starring Douglas Fairbanks Jr. David's version has the TARDIS landing on the seemingly peaceful planet of Tara, with the Doctor feeling in need of a holiday. While he takes time off to go fishing, Romana quickly locates the 4th segment of the Key to Time. All is going well until the time travelers are drawn into the complex political intrigues of Tara. The benevolent Prince Reynard is soon to be crowned king, but the wicked Count Grendel wants both the throne and Reynard's bride-to-be, the Princess Strella, the parallel to the prisoner of the original's title, for himself. Grendel plots with the android builder, Madame Lamia, and soon both Reynard and Strella are replaced by robotic duplicates. Unfortunately for Romana, she also bears a startling resemblance to the princess, which makes her enormously valuable to the Count. With time running out, the Doctor is unwillingly thrust into the roles of android repairman, kingmaker, and ultimately swashbuckling hero, when he finds himself dueling with Grendel, famous for being the finest swordsman on Tara. The tale had great resonance and nostalgia for me, reminding me so much as it did of the old films my mother had taken me to see all those years ago in my hometown of Bradford. Also, David's adaptation, which wove the android theme into the old threads of a fairy tale-like narrative, was thrillingly innovative and gave the piece an edge. I set off for rehearsal at the Acton Hilton, as usual, and met the rest of the cast, who all seemed really friendly and well-suited to their parts. I was especially interested to meet Peter Jeffrey, who was playing Count Grendel, as, although we had both appeared in the Odessa File, we had never met, our roles in that movie having been filmed weeks apart and in different locations. Other wonderful actors included Declan Mulholland, Simon Lack, Neville Jason, and the inimitable Cyril Shapps. It was also a relief to see another woman in the cast, the lovely Louise Baxter, who portrayed her role of Lamia so well. So often in the series, the casts were male-dominated, with female roles being well outnumbered. I realized quite fast that I had a great deal of work ahead of me, and when rehearsals began, became quietly determined to get cracking. Our director, Mike Hayes, was a lovely man, and we got on very well. He was an actor in a former life, and had also produced A for Andromeda, that wonderful and groundbreaking science fiction series of the 60s, starring Julie Christie in one of her first TV roles. This was his first foray into the wonderful world of Doctor Who. We, the Thesps, all adored him, but unfortunately he and Tom hit it off rather too well, and filled the rehearsal hours outvying each other with long, rambling anecdotes and jokes which, although amusing, did not help with the grueling task I faced in trying to give each of the 4 roles I was playing a different flavor. Well, not so much with the robots, admittedly. They were much of a muchness. But I certainly wanted some help from Mike in deciding how to play Strella. Not much was forthcoming, so I had to grapple with it on my own. Most unfair. To be suddenly landed with such an overwhelming task and then not to have the director to deal with it. I thought longingly of George, spent in Foster, and how he would have shut Tom up right away and got on with the show. Oh well. No use baying for the moon. I did my best, gritted my teeth, and tried to suggest restarting rehearsal as often as I could. But it was a losing battle. The month was July, and we were to film the location scenes at Leeds Castle in Kent, a most beautiful building, and surrounded by tranquil woodland, which we also utilized in the story. It was my favorite location in the series. The setting was just superb, and the sense of history very useful in helping us all with the larger-than-life characters we were playing. I refer to Strella here, not Romana. Not only that, but the weather turned out to be gorgeous, too. A week of sun, unheard of for location filming usually. It was, therefore, like a mini-holiday. We were a very happy bunch of thesps as we shot the first scenes in the woods. One of my first was with Peter, who had to carry me to his horse. Unfortunately, the path leading to where the patient animal stood had a slight uphill gradient, and after the third take, poor Peter staggered and nearly dropped me. He put me down, not terribly gently, I may add, mopped his brow and declared that he needed a break. I was hardly a 10-ton Tessie, but his costume was quite cumbersome. The weather was hot, and the hill must have seemed steeper and steeper with each take. Poor guy. My own costume was a bit of a personal triumph. I had some writing to do in the story, and Doreen Jones, the costume designer, had shown me a sketch for a suitable outfit one day during rehearsals in the Acton Hilton. It was for a heavy woolen suit with baggy culottes and in a muddy brown. I hated it on sight, and was wondering how I could tactfully tell Dorian when Graham Williams suddenly appeared, glanced at the sketch, and said, "Woo, Dorian, we are filming in summer, darling." Whew, saved by the producer. Dorian, Graham, and I sat down over lunch that day, and between us designed the new costume that was to be the most admired of all Romana's threads. I chose the colors and the fabrics, satin and velvet, two of my favorites. Doreen designed the cutaway jacket and the other main features, and Graham added the hat. The finished ensemble was a virtual triumph and my favorite costume of the show. In fact, that particular costume had received more fan mail over the years than I have. Strella's costume was another masterpiece and looked even more fabulous on screen than off. My favorite scene in the 4 episodes is the one where Strella and Romana, both dressed in the costume, are sewing and chatting cosily together with a corpse lying in the background. It is so surreal. Back in Kent, we moved on to another scene where Tom was fishing in a lake. He had been supplied with a very handsome fishing rod, which the props department was particularly proud of, as it was an authentic and very valuable antique. Take after take ensued before finally Tom gave a particularly theatrical flourish to the rod, and it slipped from his grasp, flying over the lake and landing in its depths with a loud plop. Consternation and panic sprang up among the crew. The rod was only on loan to us. What to do? Luckily, Tom's stunt double, Terry Walsh, was on hand. He manfully stripped to his underpants and plunged into the lake, diving time and time again until the rod was found, to a cheer of appreciation each time. What a hero! Terry was also an accomplished sword fighter. He arranged the dueling scenes, and a great horseman, too. Another skill which he actually taught me between scenes was aikido, a Japanese martial art which is designed to use the motion of the attacker in self-defense rather than opposing them. It was great fun to learn the odd move or two, and I became quite expert, thanks to Terry's patient tuition. One day we were practicing a move which involved close body contact. Terry had his arms around my waist and was grasping me quite firmly from behind. It was my task to try and get out of it by pushing backwards and using his weight to throw him to the ground. We tussled for a few moments, and then I heard an angry bellow. "Hey! What are you doing to my wife?" A running figure approached, whom I immediately recognized to be Marcus, my husband. He was visiting the location that day, as it was only a short journey from London, and had arrived early. Terry sprang back in embarrassment, only just preventing Marcus from landing a blow on his nose, as he explained what we were up to. It took a few minutes to convince my angry spouse that nothing untoward was afoot, but then we all had a good laugh about it, with Terry promising to throw in a free aikido lesson for Marcus later, too. Terry had had a narrow escape. I am sure that, among the many dangers a stuntman had to face, confronting an actor's protective hubby was something he had never envisaged. Terry had his work cut out on the androids of Tara, what with the fights, duels, and other stunts he had to arrange, as well as horse riding, when he doubled for Tamm. We had discussed the possibility of my executing the riding required from Romana's character myself, and not using a double. The first riding scene, with myself and Peter both astride the horse, at the beginning of episode 1, was executed at a slow amble, so we had no worries over this one. However, there was a later scene where Romana had to escape from the castle on horseback at a somewhat brisker pace. I had been a proficient rider since the age of about 7, when I managed to pay for an hour's tuition a week with the money from my paper round up in Yorkshire. Later, when I moved to London, I rode regularly in Richmond Park, and when Marcus and I were married, we assumed a Saturday habit of an early morning hack on Wimbledon Common. However, I was mindful of my previous experience when I had fallen off a horse whilst filming The Return of the Saint, when I'd injured my back very badly. I had also had a horrific experience in France, where I had been working for a French family during the long summer holidays prior to taking my final year of A-level French. I was teaching English to the child of the family, and some friends of theirs had invited me to the country, where I rode bareback for the first time. I galloped off on the horse, who decided to swerve swiftly to the left. I fell off and lost consciousness. I woke up in hospital 2 days later with total memory loss, which was quite terrifying, I can assure you. My memory came back, but the doctors in Les Hôpitaux Américains in Paris informed me that I was to be kept in for observation for a week. I flew back to England after that, where I underwent many more tests on my brain, and had to sleep without a pillow for the next 6 months, as a precaution against any possible clots occurring in the skull cavity. The whole process, although scary, did not put me off riding again in the least, and I was back in the saddle as soon as I could afford it. But here at Leeds Castle was another matter altogether, namely to be riding on a strange animal with very little time for rehearsal. 10 years later, when I heard of actor Roy Kinnear's tragic death after a riding accident whilst filming The Three Musketeers, I felt a shiver of horror run down my spine. There is generally not enough concern for safety when shooting historical scenes with horses involved. Modern-day settings, when riding horses are de rigueur, are okay, but no one wore them in earlier centuries. Actors are always so brave in coming up with whatever the scene requires, but this can be extremely foolhardy where equestrian skills are concerned. As a rider, I knew only too well how unpredictable horses could be. Consequently, and in this instance, when I had a long work schedule stretching ahead of me, I decided not to risk it, and the scene where Romana canters away over the cobbles of the castle courtyard was done by a stunt woman. I did have fun mounting the horse in the scene outside the castle walls, however. I decided to invent a piece of comedy business here, and got onto my patient steed the wrong way, that is, by putting the right foot instead of the left foot in the stirrup first, and then swinging my right leg over the front of the saddle, a real no-no in equestrian terms, but one which worked very well visually. The very handsome grey chosen for this action sequence was a dear, one-eyed horse by the name of Winston, who nearly stole the scene. What an actor! And so patient. Back in the studio, I had a few hairy moments as Princess Strella. In the coronation scene, the crown fell off my head, so we rolled again. I then forgot the last line of a long speech, which meant we had to go again, and then the crown fell off again. We finally got it in the can after 4 takes. Whew! Watching the episodes back for the DVD commentaries reinforces my opinion that this was the best story on the Key to Time series for me. Mike did a wonderful job on the direction with beautiful, moody, tree-framed shots. The actors were well cast, and the finished product well edited. Ultimately, though, it was the story that appealed to me best, as it was quite rare to have such a dominantly classical fairy tale theme in Who. I was exhausted and happy when we finished, and began looking forward to the next story.